Do the Raiders truly have interest in quarterback Justin Fields, or is that just a combine rumor? That plus a whole lot more comes up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, February 28th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, you're checking us out on YouTube. Thanks so much. Appreciate you. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's big ups to you. And, of course, big ups to my man Ari. He does a great job each and every day, making sure we're on YouTube, making sure we're looking good and we're sounding good. We definitely appreciate him. Hit him up on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. We'll get back to your calls and texts coming up in segment number 3 of the show. We'll get as much in as possible. Got a whole handful of calls and texts that we'll try to make sure we squeeze in there coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, GM Tom Telesco. He talked to the media multiple times on Tuesday at the Combine here in Indy, one time at the podium. That's one that I think everybody probably heard by way of Raiders.com. I had it on my radio show on Raider Nation Radio 920 as well in the afternoon. But he also talked with the media to the side, did a little bit of a scrum with local media, again, just kind of to the side. It was supposed to be in the hallway, but there was enough room right there near the podiums that we did it right there. And I thought it was a really good conversation, about 10 minutes worth of Tom Telesco conversation about roster building, free agency, the draft, and a whole lot more. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do. So let's go ahead and jump into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins, just like that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And off top, I talked about the Raiders having interest in quarterback Justin Fields. And there's been a lot of conversation, obviously, here on the podcast, on the radio show, on Twitter, wherever you can find any conversation about the Raiders. It's always going to get back to the quarterback. It's one of the biggest subjects all offseason long for the Silver and Black. And I didn't think that there was really anything to do with it when it comes to Justin Fields, especially after Luke Getsy was hired as the offensive coordinator. Of course, he was the offensive coordinator there in Chicago as well. And they didn't work too well together. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. So I've seen reports, I've seen people talk about the Raiders have interest in Justin Fields, and I kind of just brushed it off and was like, yeah, whatever. But then my guy Tyler Dragon hit me up from USA Today Sports, real good friend of mine, and again, a guy that I really respect and know that he doesn't just throw stuff against the wall and hoping that it'll stick. He put out a tweet: the Falcons, Steelers, and Raiders have expressed interest in Bears quarterback Justin Fields, according to sources. But then he sent me a text, and he was like, hey, thought you might want to know. And I thought, that's not like Tyler. So I hit him back, and I was like, are you sure about this, or is this just kind of combine conversation? He's like, I believe from what I've been told, it's pretty real deal interest, and so that's why I thought I'd pass it along to you. Again, I trust Tyler because I know he's not just going to throw something against the wall and hope that it sticks. And again, there's been multiple reports about the Raiders having some interest in Justin Fields. I just didn't take it very seriously. Tyler goes on to say in his piece that he put out on USA Today Sports, you can check it out right now, it says Fields is entering the final year of his rookie contract. Chicago has until May to exercise the quarterback's fifth-year option. However, the Bears will likely make a decision on Fields' future before the May deadline. General manager Ryan Poles said he wants to do right by Fields and understand no one wants to live in the gray area. And that is something that happened on Tuesday, is that Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, said he wanted to do right by Justin Fields. So it sounds like they want to make something happen sooner rather than later. Of course, they've got that fifth-year option that needs to be picked up or declined by that May, that date in May where they've got to get that done. And so any team that I believe trades for him has to pick up the fifth-year option, which is about $22 million. You let him go out there, play on his last year of his deal, which is just a little bit over $1 million. That fifth-year option is $22 million fully guaranteed. And then, of course, if he goes and balls out, then you have to worry about a contract extension that could be as easily all the way up to about $40-something million a year if he balls out. If not, maybe you just let him go and walk away from it. And again, still very skeptical about it because I just don't know, especially being here at the Combine. I know that there's a lot of conversation, a lot of rumors being floated to see if, teams are going to jump at it, if it's going to be some kind of bait, if you're going to see teams play their cards and play their hand and show their hand a little bit. So I kind of left it at that. And I remember mentioning it to Vinny Bonsignore. Then later on in the afternoon, while I was doing the radio show Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920, Vinny was also along for the ride and on the show with me as well. And he showed me a text message from somebody, and on his phone it said that I think that Justin Fields would be great in silver and black. And then I said, okay, so who's that from? And he let me know, and just let it be known, it was a very good player on the Raiders, his agent. So I'm starting to put two and two together and thinking maybe there really is some kind of interest. And let me just say it like this. Whoever that player was, whoever the agent is, obviously I feel like that they probably have had that discussion with that player who is currently on the silver and black. And I'll leave it at that. Again, it might not be anything, right? It could just be the agent not of the player on the Raiders, but Justin Fields' agent, drum up interest. It could be Ryan Poles and the Bears trying to drum up some interest, or it could be a real deal thing. Again, I didn't think it was a whole lot to it. I just want to report to you what I'm hearing here at the Combine. Not saying that it's facts, not saying that's going to happen, not saying that I even want it to happen, just letting you know what I'm hearing here in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine. Also, one more little nugget I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, and this one makes me laugh. Mike Lombardi on the GM Shuffle podcast is talking about Antonio Pierce and the Mahomes rules. And, it's so funny, and I say this all the time, and I tell the wife, I tell anyone who will listen to me, people will root for you until they don't. And it's so funny how the conversation has shifted on AP. While AP was the interim head coach, when most people thought he probably wasn't going to get the opportunity, everyone screamed from the mountaintops, what are the Raiders doing? Give him the job. He put life into the team. He brought back the Raider way. He is a Raider. Like, everybody was championing and pounding the table for AP because he was authentically himself. Now all of a sudden you're hearing everyone say, AP can't say that. He can't come out and talk like that. Like Mike Greenberg, come out. If I was Roger Goodell, I would call him and tell him, you can't take away my moneymaker. Like, all of a sudden, the conversation has shifted. It's almost like everyone said, oh, we're going to say that AP deserves a job, and we love that he's himself, and we love that he brought back the Raider way, because, well, he's not going to get the job. It's going to go to someone else, and then we could all say that we are rooting for him and stupid Raiders for not hiring him. And now they hired him, and he's still authentically himself, which is what everyone loved to begin with, and now everyone has a problem with it. So Mike Lombardi on the GM Shuffle podcast, and please believe I don't listen to that. He was a former Raiders front office guy. Of course, his son, Mick Lombardi, was the offensive coordinator. He got fired with Josh McDaniels, so you kind of know how that goes. All of a sudden, he went from respecting the Raiders, as a front office guy, to not liking the Raiders. Then Mick Lombardi gets hired, and he likes the Raiders again, and then he's fired, and he doesn't like them again. So take it with a grain of salt. But it's so funny. One of the quotes from his podcast, the GM Shuffle, said, just because he, and talking about Antonio Pierce, is from Compton, he thinks he knows the Raiders' way. It's a joke. And then he goes on to talk more about AP on his podcast, and he's talking about AP when he was on the podcast, the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark. He was on the Max Crosby, the Rush podcast, and even some radio hits he's done. But here's Mike Lombardi talking about AP and the Mahomes rules and what he believes someone in the Raiders organization needs to do.
Won't somebody in the Raiders tell him to shut up? Like, just shut up. Like, you're not P.T. Barnum. Stop promoting. Like, get back to work.
Barnum.
I mean, like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Like, what are you going to get? You've beaten them one time. They had and they went on and won the Super Bowl from there. I mean, this is like, your job is to be a strategist. Your job isn't to be a promoter. I mean, like, he's embarrassed. I'm just telling you, this is bad. This is bad. And look, it has nothing to do. This thing, you can't talk like this in the offseason when your team doesn't even have a freaking quarterback.
So I just found that to be really funny. And like I say it all the time, and I truly, truly mean it, Raider Nation. People will always root for you until they don't. Once you start doing something that they actually thought that you weren't going to do, they'll show their true colors. And it's so funny how many people now are speaking out on AP about, you can't do this, you can't do that. Look, Jack, it is the offseason. It is not like he's coaching up the Raiders to play a game on Sunday, right? So if he's out on a podcast, he's talking and he's being himself, so be it. And the fact that it's bothering people, I love every minute of it. He is getting under folks' skin for doing nothing but being him, doing exactly what he did to get the job with the Raiders. Of course, he went out and won games, but again, it is the offseason. Tom Telesco is talking at the podium. AP is on a podcast with Max Crosby, his teammate, who's got a lot of respect for. Ryan Clark, who is a guy that was his teammate in Washington, he's just about best friends with. On the radio show with myself, on the radio show with JT, been on CBS Sports, was on multiple different radio shows when we were on Radio Row for Super Bowl 58. Just hilarious. For him being authentically him, all of a sudden now it's a problem. I love it. And again, if it irritates people, if it gets underneath people's skin, great. You want to talk about the Raider way that Mike Lombardi thinks that AP doesn't know about? Guess what? That is exactly it. Yeah, you're irritating people. You're getting under the skin. You're making them mad because you don't fit in with what they like to do. Guess what? Deal with it. Deal with it. I love every minute of it, and I guarantee AP does as well. We actually get to talk to him a little bit later on this afternoon, and, I'm going to try to find a way to phrase, what do you think about all the people who all of a sudden are, basically against you or talking bad about you for being authentically you, which is exactly why they applauded you while you were the interim head coach, which is so funny to me. But again, it is people 101. People will always root for you until they won't. They will always find a way to decide, oh, wait, hold on. He's not really supposed to be doing that. We just said that to gas him up. We didn't think he could do it. Now that he's doing it, he can't do that. Antonio Pierce can do that. You want to talk about the Raider way is back? Raider Nation, the Raider way is back. That's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. How about the current GM? Tom Telesco, he met with the media multiple times on Tuesday. You'll actually hear that second little media session, little off to the side, not something that was streamed on Raiders.com, but a little conversation that we had off to the side. Some really good stuff, talking free agency, talking Josh Jacobs, talking quarterbacks, and more. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And we know that the NFL season, it's in the books. But the NBA, full throttle. The All-Star break, long gone. It's kind of cool being here in Indianapolis where the Indiana Pacers play right around the corner, and they just had the All-Star game here in Indiana, and there's still a lot of fever, a lot of energy around the city based off the basketball team. But the NBA is full throttle. You can get buckets right now with your first bet on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. All new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. I also want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, which is BetterHelp. And I love the description I got of BetterHelp just the other day while I was here in Indianapolis, and I'm going to let that ride with me for a while. BetterHelp will help you be a better you, right? I love that. I love that. And it's funny. I literally got that from a description from someone I was just walking and talking with, and all of a sudden BetterHelp came up. And that's what BetterHelp does. And it doesn't matter what the conversation is. It doesn't matter how big the situation is or how small the situation could end up being, right? BetterHelp is here for you because sometimes therapy is just what you need. You need someone who, is neutral when it comes to your life. You need someone that's going to be open and honest with you about the situation that they hear and only wants the best for you. That's how BetterHelp could come into play, and it could really help you become you and a better you, as a matter of fact. A lot of us spend more time wishing we had more time. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Had an opportunity on Tuesday to catch up with GM Tom Telesco. He talked to the media multiple times. One was at the podium about 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Was it 10 a.m. or 11 a.m.? Do the math. 12. Yeah, 10 a.m. Pacific time. My time zones are way off. But it was great to hear him at the podium, and I know a lot of folks were able to hear that by way of Raiders.com. Of course, they streamed that on their YouTube page. But we also knew that there was going to be an opportunity to catch him off to the side and just get a few minutes with the local media, not different people coming in from Auburn or, other teams, the Chargers, this, that, and the other, just to get a few minutes with Tom Telesco. So here's the side conversation that we had. Vinny starts things off talking about the offense, and Tom Telesco had mentioned at the podium that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that side of the ball. So Vinny Bonsignore starts us off talking all things offense. Little side conversation with GM Tom Telesco.
Tom, you had mentioned that a lot of work to do offensively. Are we talking more scheme? Is it talent? Is it personnel? What would you...
Well, it'll be a new scheme just based on a new coordinator.
Yeah.
And then, if you look at the offense, like right now, like just for agency-wise, like our offensive line is, has a lot of holes. So we got to kind of figure that all out. So it's going to be a collaborative effort amongst the coaching staff and personnel staff to kind of get this thing moving.
You've been in the AFC West for a long time. Now that you've gone through the roster, how close do you feel like the Raiders are to competing with those guys who just won a back-to-back championship?
Yeah, impossible to answer how close you are, but we're going to keep working towards it. So I was asked earlier on another interview, when you build your team, are you building your team's foundation? Or are you building a team to beat the Chiefs?
Right.
I'm like, well, the answer is we're building our team's foundation, but you can't help but see, the Super Bowl champs are right in our division, and Patrick Mahomes is there. So as you go through the process, we're looking at Denver, we're looking at Kansas City, looking at the Chargers, obviously, which I should say I know them pretty well, but they're going to be completely different next year. So as you build your football team, you need to build us first, but you can't help but have your eye on the division team. You can't help but have your eye on the Chiefs and how you match up with them. But our plan is to we know we have to build, okay, but I don't see this as trying to tear everything down and start from scratch. We want to be able to compete and win along the way, so that's the goal.
What's the biggest challenge evaluating quarterbacks before the draft, as far as looking at these young guys and to figure out what they're about and what you can project for them going forward?
It's like all the positions. You're projecting them to the next level. So there's a lot of players that are really great college players that just don't pan out at this level. So trying to project forward on these players, we have it so much easier than other sports. Imagine a baseball scout trying to project a high school senior to a Major League Baseball player. That's hard. We have it easy. We've watched, these quarterbacks are all big school quarterbacks, so we've seen them play against other big schools. But still, there's a jump there, and can you do that the same thing at this level? So, you put enough scouts' opinions, coaches' opinions, and then head coach's opinion and my opinion, and you kind of get that all together, and you try and make the right decision. You just try and increase your odds on the player you take, no matter what position it is, that you're going to hit on the guy. But we all know that we're not right all the time. So,
Tom, you go through your history, and Jim Kelly, Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Justin Herbert, you know what a big-time quarterback looks like. Does that make you more aware that you need that kind of a quarterback, or do you feel like there's other ways to win games?
Well, put it this way. Yeah, everybody's looking for that Patrick Mahomes, obviously. Right. But those guys you just mentioned, where it helps me is I know what they put into the job inside the building that people don't see, that you don't see on tape, and what it takes to be a quarterback in this league. Justin Herbert and Phillip Rivers and Peyton Manning, and how they prepared to play at this level, what you have to do. I think that helps me being around those guys and know what it takes. Because it's more than just watching tape of a player, especially at the quarterback position, because so much of the game is from here up.
Right.
And how do you evaluate this? And this is hard. So seeing those guys on a day-to-day basis at least helps me, for whoever down the road, whoever we take, you got to have those same qualities.
You've never had to trade up for any of those guys when you think about that. Does that make are you less reluctant to do that? People say, well, he's never done it before, but you never really had to either.
Yeah, you just trading up at any point in a round, you have to weigh it. How bad do you want the player, and how much are you giving up, and what are you losing with that? So it's just a judgment decision. And, part of that is we may think we know the player is going to hit, but we really don't, right? We just don't. You never 100% know. But you have to weigh what you're giving up, and could that set you back, or can you handle it? So that's all judgment decisions.
Tom, do you envision exploring the veteran quarterback market at all this offseason, or is it pretty much about the draft?
No, we'll explore every avenue. and I like the quarterback that we have. I mean, I thought he did a really good job last year. Rookie quarterback to come in and play the way he played in the circumstances he played in, I think that you should not discount that.
It's something, I know we talked about trading up, but I believe so. In your tenure with the Chargers, you never traded down. Is there something philosophically that you were against trading down, or did it just not come together?
No, I would love to trade down. It just didn't, in those circumstances, it just didn't present itself in something we thought made sense for us. But certainly it's not a philosophical reason to not doing that.
Now that you've started to dive in and look at the Raiders, is there something that's pleasantly surprised you that maybe you weren't expecting?
There's a lot of things because I just didn't know much about, the team, the organization until I got here. There's a lot of people in the building that are really impressive at what they do in all different departments, and that's things you don't know until you get there. That's been great to see. Actually, the building itself has been amazing. But I guess, when just looking at the football team, when you can establish a level of toughness and kind of have that, and I think that can carry over from year to year, that's hard to do, and I think we have that right now. So we're starting with the base of that, which is encouraging. So that's the one thing, and I know I mentioned that already, but the mental and physical toughness of the football team just continued to show up throughout the year last year, so that's a good base to start with.
When you scout and evaluate your guys that you have in the building from a personnel perspective, what are the things that you preach to these scouts and these people in place as to what you're looking for the roster?
Well, it kind of varies by position, and a lot of that varies based on what we're going to be on offense and defense. But for every player, like a drive and desire to be great, those are two traits that you just have to have in this league. Because every team is good, every team has talent. But when we bring players in here, you got to have a drive to be great, a drive to be better, and get work in. And what I've noticed, at least so far, is how many players right now are coming to our building to work out on their own in the off season. It's not like that everywhere, and that shows me right there. The guys, they want to be around each other, and they want to do things to make them a better football player. So that's a base part of it. I'm seeing that already. It's pretty early in the process, but I've kind of noticed that already.
Antonio talked about from day one embracing the Raider culture and the bravado, all of that. He's been known to go on some podcasts and say some things. Are you cool with that? Are you fine with him just that's who he is and being fine with things?
I am. Plus, I'm so boring, it will kind of even its way out because I never say anything that's remotely interesting, and he's the other way. So I think it'll kind of be good for the Raiders. But I think it's great. You want to have an identity of who you are. And I want to lean into the Raiders' identity. And that's part of the Raiders' identity. So it doesn't bother me at all. I kind of like it.
Tom, I'm sorry.
You mentioned offensive line. What was your evaluation of that unit last year? And what do you look at as far as the guys in the market like Andre and Jermaine?
As a group of five, they did a pretty good job in pass protection. And run game wasn't bad as well. Third down, it's everybody involved. Third down wasn't great. Red zone play wasn't really good, but as far as they held up pretty well last year. A group that was kind of put together, a little bit draft, a little bit of free agency, a little bit of late signings. So we'd like to get some consistency in there with that group. Usually O-line consistency takes a number of years to get there. And you're talking about 5 starters plus you need at least 2 more after that really can come in and play. So it just takes time to kind of build that and get that together. And I'd like to have a group that's kind of plays together, consistently. Even in the free agency era, it's hard, but you can still kind of get there. So it may take some time to get it exactly where you want it, but we've got some areas there that is, the free agency. We got some holes there. So.
What is your philosophy when it comes to free agency about building the team and maybe not going too deep into free agency, kind of building it with the draft as well?
Yeah, the philosophy is we want to re-sign our own players rather than go sign somebody else's UFAs. That's the philosophy. However, you do have to supplement your roster with UFAs. And then this year, with where we are, we're going to have to sign some free agents. That's basically it's an all new regime as far as coaches and GM. And there's some things we need to do to get up and running. So we may have to use free agency a little more this year than typically I would like, but it's going to be part of the process. You just have to be very careful in free agency. I know the cap went up this year, which is great. But it doesn't matter if it's 255 or 555. It's the same group of players that are available. Yeah. And unfortunately, the success rate isn't that high. In football, when you change teams as a free agent. So, very few of those guys even finish their contract when they sign a big UFA contract. So, got to be very cautious with it, spend the money wisely. But yeah, we're going to have to, probably go that route a little bit more this year than usual. But you have to use all avenues in this league between free agency, draft, street players, trades. Like, you just can't really have, hey, we're draft only. It just doesn't work.
Tom, you looking at, you just admitted you're going to need to sign some free agents. You've got to be extremely happy when you look at your salary cap situation.
Yeah, like I said, you just got to spend it wisely. But, a lot of that money, it's not like we're going to take all that money and spend it all on free agents this year. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, extensions for our own players, even having money forward for when we have other bigger contracts we have to do. But yeah, to be in a situation that we do have some to spend, it's better than the alternative, right?
So there you go. I thought that was a lot of really good stuff right there. 10 minutes of, just hard hitting, right to the point, ask the questions that need to be answered. And clearly the Raiders are going to be players in free agency. I think that there's a great chance that Josh Jacobs is going to come back. You mentioned Josh Jacobs and re-signing their homegrown guys multiple times and how they want to prioritize that. I think that's great. And I think that Josh Jacobs will be a very reasonable deal. I don't think he'll break the bank just because the free agent market for running backs is large right now. And so I think that there's a great chance that Josh Jacobs, especially knowing how much AP really appreciates Josh Jacobs, is going to want to make sure that he returns and back in the mix. So I think Josh Jacobs is going to come back. Sounds like the Raiders are going to be big-time players in free agency. I expect them to attack the trenches, the offensive line and defensive line, and that's exactly what they need to do. Of course, the quarterback's going to be the big elephant in the room, but I thought that was some really good stuff with GM Tom Telesco. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, you're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. Draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Izzy. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position, talks about what he would like the Raiders to do if they can't get one of the top-tier quarterbacks, brings up a name that's starting to get some extra love as of late. Here he is, Raider Izzy.
What up, Q? Raider Izzy. Wanted to chime in on the quarterback conversation from Monday's show. I'm all in. I totally agree with Jaden Daniels. You know that. I love Jaden Daniels. He's my, pipe dream, I guess you could say. And trading into the top 3 to get, honestly, any of those 3, I'm in. I'm all in. Where I'm starting to veer a little bit is beyond that. If we can't get into the top 3, which honestly is very possible, like you said. It's very possible we can't get into the top 3 for numerous reasons. If we can't, when it comes to Knicks, when it comes to, Penix, even McCarthy, I think McCarthy's going to go a lot higher than we think too, but man, I would rather take one of these stud tackles like Flaga or Latham, or one of these stud corners, like Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold or one of these guys, or even I think Rakestraw. I haven't watched him yet, but I hear good things. But so I'm holding back on that yet. But I'd rather take one of these guys and then Rattler in round 2 than take Nix or Penix in round 1 at that 13th spot. I feel like it's settling. I'm just not in on that. Man, Rattler got rave reviews at the Senior Bowl. They said he was the best quarterback there. The dude's been through so much adversity, and honestly, a lot of it, I know people are talking about, he's a bad teammate, all that. The only reason we know that is because that kid had a camera in his face in high school. That kid was on a Netflix show when he was in high school. I'm sure a lot of these quarterbacks had the same issues when they were that age. They just didn't have a camera in front of them. That dude has turned everything around. He's been through so much adversity. The dude's a leader. They love him in South Carolina. And honestly, that team had no talent around him. Aside from, they didn't like it. I get it. Fine. But, even that before this year, he was nothing. No offensive line at all. Dude ran for his life constantly. Man, I'm going him in round 2, if he's even there in round 2. I'm taking him in round 2 over Penix and Nix in round 1 at 13. Give me one of those tackles. Give me one of those corners. Just my opinion, but love the show as always, bro. Later.
Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. It's a really good question that might need to be answered, right? What do the Raiders do if they can't get that top-tier guy? Do they go for a Penix, Nix, McCarthy, or do they look at that as a settle, and do they roll the dice with a guy like Spencer Rattler? And it's funny, I had a guy hit me up on Twitter on Tuesday saying that Spencer Rattler is not getting any conversation by anybody, and I feel like Spencer Rattler's name is coming up just about every single day on the podcast, on the radio show, on Twitter. Sounds like there's a lot of steam building for one Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina by way of Oklahoma. So we'll see what happens, right? He's been getting a lot of love lately as far as I'm concerned. And, the Raiders could go and get a cornerstone offensive tackle or a quarterback or a defensive tackle at 13 if that's what they choose to do. There's a lot of areas that need to be addressed. I do believe that they're going to make sure that they address the trenches, either by way of free agency or the draft, or maybe both. But they're definitely, in my opinion, going to attack the trenches. So thanks so much, Raider Izzy, for that call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Jay in Syracuse, New York. Pretty lengthy text. He says, my Raiders rookie quarterback prospect ratings. 1, Caleb Williams. I guess I'll buy the hype if Raiders end up at the number 1 pick. This is where they would have to go. 2, Michael Penix Jr. Everyone knows he has the best arm in the draft. No one in this draft class could throw the ball better. A lot of people forget how important that is. 3, Jaden Daniels. I guess there's a connection with AP because Antonio Pierce scouted him. He's definitely the most mobile quarterback. And 4, Drake May. Probably the second most balanced quarterback in the draft behind Caleb Williams. I would not be disappointed at all if the Raiders ended up drafting May. 5, Spencer Rattler. Again, at this point, I'd rather the Raiders not draft a quarterback if the first round and in the first round draft Spencer Rattler later. 6, J.J. McCarthy. I like Michigan. I watched a lot of J.J. McCarthy's career. He's a great college quarterback, but I'm not convinced he'll be a great NFL quarterback. 7, Bo Nix. Unless we can somehow get him in the second round or trade up late in the first round, I do not want Bo Nix with the 13th pick, so I can guarantee Bo Nix will be the quarterback for the Raiders next year. That's Jay in Syracuse, New York. Thanks so much for that ranking, breaking down 7 different quarterbacks. And, again, for me, as I mentioned on Tuesday's show, it's Jaden Daniels and then Michael Penix. And I think both those guys would fit really well with the silver and black. I know that other guys could get the job done. Obviously, Caleb Williams, I believe he'll be, the guy taking number 1 overall unless Chicago decides to let him slip to Washington at number 2, or maybe Washington jumps up to number 1 to go get him. Drake May, I'm not a big fan. He took a step back in 2023, so I think that he's got a lot of explaining to do. He's not throwing at the combine, so nobody's going to see him there, and I don't think that's a really big deal. Anyway, you saw him on film, and I think everyone else is kind of big question marks, who they can be or what they could be moving forward. But thanks for the rankings. I definitely appreciate that. Up next, got a call from Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to respond to the question that I wanted to ask AP and GM Tom Telesco that I mentioned on Monday's podcast and also on my radio show. How close do you think the Raiders realistically are to competing with Kansas City consistently? Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon. Loving your podcast, man. Hearing you on your radio show now, Raider Nation Radio, and you're asking that same question from your pod of like, hey, how close do you're trying to get the pulse of Raider Nation as to how close do you think this team is to competing with Kansas City and being a legit contender as far as, competing with them? That's a great question. I feel like it tells a lot, like you said, about where they're going to go with free agency in the draft. And personally, the answer is pretty complicated for me because I think that we're, the defense, we're pretty close. Like on paper, if you look at what we got going on defense and how we finished the year on a really strong note, and look at Kansas City defensively, they still, have the upper hand on us with that unit. And so, if anything, you could chalk that up as we're, pretty comparable in that area. But as far as offensively, I think we got a ways to go. And what I mean by that is I think the Raiders could come out and have a really good year in 24 and actually, have a winning record and possibly get into playoffs depending on the quarterback situation. But it's the consistency. It's that consistency. We've seen a couple flashy years in the past, whether it be, 2021, 10-7 year playoffs, but it was the consistency. It just didn't translate over the next year. And so with Kansas City, it's hard to really, with them, they're one of the teams that have just been consistently doing it for half a decade plus now, close to a decade with Reed over there. And so I think it's just a hard one to answer, as far as how close we are. But I will say, I think they got to look at this as more of baby steps. Like instead of gauging it off of Kansas City, which we want to win that division, you also have to ask how close are they just to being a playoff team? Because the NFL, the way it shakes out is if you get in the dance, anything could happen, an injury, anything. Let's say how close are we to Kansas City? Well, if we make playoffs, who's to say they're what team's hot at that moment? And so I don't know. I think we're pretty close to being playoffs. One other thing I want to touch on, I just don't see the Raiders signing Jacobs back, which bums me out. I like Jacobs. I've liked him, from the moment we acquired him. I've been stoked on his story, and even last year he made the best of a situation. He wasn't. Could argue he didn't come in the greatest shape, but I think that's going to cost him getting re-signed because honestly, I know Q, you brought up all that extra cap and we need a bell cow, but yeah, we got a bell cow. Zeus, actually played better than Jacobs down the stretch anyway. Peace out, man.
Thanks for the call, my man. That's a way to look at it for sure. It can be complicated. It can take baby steps, or they could be simply a quarterback and a few players away from being that squad. The funny thing is, when I did ask GM Tom Telesco, and you heard that coming up, or heard that in segment number 2, I should say, he said, I don't really know if there's an answer to that, but then he went on to talk about the fact that you've got to build a team to try to beat that team. And he's been asked that multiple times. Like, are you trying to just build your team to be your team? Or are you trying to build your team to compete with that team? And there's a sense of reality that you have to try to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs. So they're very much aware of that. I thought it was a good way for him to answer that question without just saying, yeah, we're close. Now, AP, he might think that, yeah, they're close. And he might say that out loud because, well, AP is going to be him. I can appreciate that. But, we'll see. I think that the Raiders have plenty of talent. They obviously need to get the upgrade, I think, at the quarterback position, and there are a few, pieces away in the trenches from really being a team, I think, that can consistently compete with the Kansas City Chiefs. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Assassin's Ghost. Hey, Q, the Assassin Ghost here. Devante is a Raider. So now we can stop hearing people text and calling about trading him. Let's get Daniels and get to work. Peace. That's Assassin's Ghost. Quick and fast on that text, and that was something that was asked to Tom Telesco when he was at the podium on Tuesday. If a team or GM calls and says, is Devante Adams available? He said he's a Raider. So can that change? Can that be GM conversation? Sure. Can that try to build up the, what it would take to get him? Sure. But I do take him at his word that Devante is a Raider, and I think it makes all sense in the world for Devante to be a Raider and not be anything else. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you, and I'm sure that Raider Nation was happy to hear that when he said that on the podium on Tuesday. Up next, got a call from Raider Tez out of the Valley Joe. That's Vallejo, California. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position and what veteran he'd like to see added and why. Here he is, Raider Tez.
What's up, man? This is Raider Tez coming out of the Valley Joe, even though I got that 916 area code. I want to touch on the quarterback situation a little bit. And what I have to say is, we don't know if we're going to get Jaden Daniels. Yes, we all want him, but no, it's not a guarantee. But I really, really would like to see Russell Wilson. I think he had a pretty good season last year. They got cooking a little bit, and he just was with Sean Payton, who I guess did not want him. So, and I just didn't like the way they treated him. I think he still has some left in the tank. I think he's way better than what a Jimmy G could be as like a placeholder. So if we do get Daniels or some other quarterback, some rookie quarterback, they can get a chance to compete at camp and maybe be, that placeholder until the rookie's ready. Sort of like what Patrick Mahomes did when they had Alex Smith. They went and got him, but they still let Alex Smith cook a little bit until it was time. And obviously, that worked out great for them. There's no real guarantee in the draft, but I would like to see Russell Wilson come in as a free agent. I think he does fit with the scheme. He's still mobile, a little older, experienced, but I would really like to see that. AOC, Russell Wilson, and a rookie out the draft. preferably Jaden Daniels. All right, Raider Ted's out. Go Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. And Russell Wilson, right? That's a guy that a lot of Raider Nation does not want to see. Don't think that he'll fit in the locker room. And I'll say this, and I keep saying this, that the Raiders shouldn't rule out anybody as of right now. The Raiders should exhaust all options. Clearly, that quarterback room needs to be revamped. Aiden O'Connell has solidified his spot in that room, but a veteran quarterback, in my opinion, needs to be added, and a rookie quarterback needs to be added, in my opinion. Could it be Russell Wilson? Sure. He'll come a lot cheaper than a lot of quarterbacks because Denver has to pay the majority of his contract and his salary still, so he could try to stick it to the Broncos. But he also came out the other day and said he wants to win 2 Lombardis in 5 years. I don't know where he's going to do that. I don't know where he plans on thinking that he's going to be, the quarterback to be able to get that done, but that's a him thing. So maybe he feels like he's got plenty in the tank, he's rejuvenated, and he wants to go out there and show everybody. Could it be the Raiders? Sure. Could they go in another direction? Sure. I think the most important thing for them to do right now is not rule out anybody. Go through every single option and decide if it makes sense for the silver and black, because they definitely need to do something with that quarterback room. Raider Tez, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Got time for one more. We'll take a text from Mark from Boyle Heights, LA. He says, hey, Q, it's Mark from Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. I know a lot of questions are being asked about the quarterback situation, but I want to get your input on the offensive line. It seems like the Raiders might want to upgrade the center position, so my question is, what do you think the offensive line would look like this year? In my opinion, I think we should move Parham to center, go draft a guard, and possibly bring back Jermaine and let him take the other guard spot. And if there's ever an injury to the right tackle spot, he can be a good Band-Aid. And either draft a right tackle or sign one. Maybe even let Munford start at right tackle. What are your thoughts? Love your show. You're a monster. Thanks for keeping us Raider fans in the loop. That's Mark from Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. Thanks for the text, my man, and the compliments. I appreciate you. And, yeah, I think that's reason why Telesco said that they have to spend money in free agency, more money than he wants to do. And that was kind of my question to him about philosophy when it comes to free agency. I think they're going to spend a lot of money on the offensive line. Like you said, Parham is going to probably move to center. Andre James are probably going to let walk. Jermaine Illuminor, he is a free agent, so he might not be back. If they do, he's probably depth at the best. They need to upgrade the offensive line. Was it good last season? Sure. Tom Telesco mentioned that, yeah, they were good in pass pro. Run blocking wasn't that great. They need to get better. They need to upgrade. That's okay. Even if they were good, they continue to need to be upgraded. The right tackle position is very important. It hasn't been solidified in a long time. Thayer Munford, you asked a question about him. He's more comfortable at the left side, so I'm not too sure what he feels like about playing on the right side, but the Raiders definitely need to address that, whether it's in free agency, the draft, both. I'm expecting the line to look a lot different in 2024. But Dylan Parham, I definitely believe, is going to be the center. Of course, Colton Miller would be that left tackle. I think you have a hole at the left guard position. Maybe Jermaine Illuminor comes back. I think he's depth. But if maybe he's the right guard and they go out and get another right tackle as well, there's definitely going to be some moving and shaking along that offensive line. But thanks so much for that text. I definitely appreciate you. And that's all I got time for on today's show. Still got a call from Raider Rich. We'll get that tomorrow. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and jump into that. Let's do it right now. Let's close it out strong. Raider Rich is going to close us out. He's calling to talk about the draft order and the Raiders moving up and how far he wants them to move up. And let's just say it's not too far. Here's Raider Rich.
Hey, this is Raider Rich. I just wanted to call, man. I watch your podcast on YouTube in the morning, and I just wanted to kind of chime in and just I think I do feel how this maneuvering that this draft order is going, and my thing is I'd like for us to move up. But then again, I don't want to, like you, I think I had caught you this morning on the 27th here, giving up any major pieces like Kuntz and Jacoby Myers and, some draft picks. I just, I don't know if that's feasible, but I am kind of looking at if Caleb would to fall, in which, it's probably unlikely, but I think if he fell to number 9 and somehow that scenario worked out like that, I could see the Raiders, I would like to see the Raiders then make a move from 13 to 9. I think that would be good. And, but anything other than that, man, I don't think, I think staying put at 13, you're still going to get a good quality player. And I know that the staff is really working hard to get the right pieces and on defense and offense. So I just wanted to chime in and go Raiders.
My man. My man, I kind of laugh at that one. Thanks for the call. I appreciate you, but there's no way. There's absolutely no way. There's one thing I can tell you for sure. Caleb Williams is not dropping to number 9. That would be a shock if he dropped to number 2, right? I mean, straight up. If he drops to number 2, that's a shock, let alone number 9. He's not dropping to number 9. If he were to drop past 2, every team in the league that needs a quarterback is trying to trade up to go get him. Straight up. Just saying. If the Raiders want one of the big 3 quarterbacks, bottom line, they've got to move up to the top 3 to get one of the top 3. Raider Rich, thanks for the call. It was wishful thinking. You even mentioned it. Most likely not going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. But Raider Rich, thanks so much. I do appreciate you. Again, we're going to speak with AP this afternoon. I look forward to that. I'll bring you, of course, that good stuff here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll have more news and notes. Maybe this Justin Fields conversation, this rumor gets a little bit more legs to us. I'll update you on that. We'll get back to calls and texts. Got a lot here from Indy, man. Excited about the opportunity that we have to be here all week long and bring you everything that we can here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.